For old school Magic players like me, Commander Legends is a home run. They keep knocking it out of the park, creating these cards that represent old school characters from Magic's history, and I have to say, I'm absolutely in love with the one we're going to talk about today. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today for some more magical love. It is time to talk about an ancient necromancer from Dominaria that has finally received a card. We're going to talk about Nevinyrral. Now, I'm going to take you on the journey the same way that I've experienced it. So we're going to start all the way back at the very beginning of Magic the Gathering with Nevinyrral's Disc. Now, this card was actually created in Alpha, so it's been in Magic since the very beginning. It is a 4-cost artifact. It comes into the battlefield tapped. You pay 1 mana and tap it. You destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Now, under new school wording, cards like this, these abilities would be like, sacrifice it to do this effect, because if you can make the disc indestructible, you can literally keep using it over and over, which is dirty. But regardless, this was a really powerful removal back in the day. Like, this was the best board wipe in existence at the beginning of Magic, because any other board wipe would only hit creatures or artifacts or enchantments, and the disc just went, nah son, get that all out of here. Now, Nevinyrral's Disc definitely has a very arcane feel to it, right? Like, you look at the artwork and there's just this hand holding a disc with these crazy tentacles that are coming out of it that feel either like a demon octopus or like some kind of Cthulhian beast, you know what I mean? So it's cool, the idea that everything gets destroyed because it's it's almost like a mouth where the tentacles are like gonna like pull everything down and consume all that exists. That is a really flavorful concept, right? I've always found the artwork and idea behind this very compelling just on its own. But there's more depth to this card than you would realize at first. Apparently, Nevinyrral is actually Larry Niven backwards. It's the name of an author, okay? Because that author is what inspired this disc and may have actually inspired Magic's overall mana system altogether. In a story that was written by Larry Niven, what happens is there is a world where you can draw mana out of the land. Does that sound familiar? Sure does, right? So you can draw mana out of the land, but in this story world, that mana can be depleted, right? It just gets used up. Once you've used it, it's gone, unlike the mana that keeps renewing itself in the land connections you have in Magic the Gathering, right? But the idea behind the disc in the story was it was just supposed to be a device created by a warlock to study the effects of magic by draining the magic out of a part of the world. And that led to the creation of Nevinyrral's Disc, as well as possibly, theoretically, the entire mana system of Magic, where they got the name and everything. So I thought that was really cool. Now, they've updated Nevinyrral's Disc in terms of the way it appears, and they've even actually included in Commander Legends with new flavor text. So, the artwork is clearly very different, but also similar. They kept the concept of having a hand in it to give you an idea of the size of the disc, but instead of having one with like crazy tentacles reaching out to feed a mouth, this one appears more like something that would spin and just draw everything into it, just obliterating everything almost the same way a black hole would. That's the kind of vibe that it gives me. Every little bit of everything that exists is going to get drawn into it. Admittedly, I do wish that for this version of the Nevinyrral's Disc, they had a hand that didn't look so healthy, so it would actually look like he was the one holding it. But either way, they've got flavor text on it that says Nevinyrral's final act of spite was to make sure all of his magic was destroyed along with him. And that's true. We'll cover the story behind Nevinyrral once we get to the card itself. I just want to talk about the other cards leading up to it. So for the longest time, the only thing that really mentioned Nevinyrral was his disc, all right? And then they came along with 5th edition, I believe it was 5th edition, and they made a Drudge Skeletons that just had a fun little comedic quote from him that said, "The dead make good soldiers. They can't disobey order, they never surrender, and they don't stop fighting when a random body part falls off. So that's fun, right? And that's from Nevinyrral's Necromancer's Handbook. Just a random quote from that, right? We got that, and then just kind of radio silence for a long time, and then abruptly, out of nowhere, in the Time Spiral block, and you need to know that the Time Spiral block is about temporal manipulation as well as parallel universe-style scenarios. So you would have characters that existed, but there would be different variations of them. For example, in the normal timeline, Krovax gets cursed, but Miri gets to escape. But in a completely different timeline, Krovax actually manages to escape, and Miri gets stuck with the same curse. So you end up with like a noble, heroic version of Krovax. That's the kind of concept behind Time Spiral. So Time Spiral brought us Magus of the Disc, which is re-envisioning a different realm where Nevinyrral wasn't a necromancer, he was a necro sage, all right? So this is 2 white and 2 for a 2/4 creature, comes into play tapped, pay 1 and tap it, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So it's literally the same abilities, same wording as the disc, right? Does the same effect. The flavor text says, studying the journals of the necromage Nevinyrral leaves disciples gripped with the urge to exercise his draconian judgment. Can we talk about how cool this is as a concept? I've always loved the idea of like wizards or any kind of being that's so powerful that their power just seeps out of them even if it's unintentional. Like something as simple as writing your own journal imbues such a powerful level of your aspect that anybody reading it, especially if they don't have a strong mind, will be kind of subsumed and taken over by it and become like a servant almost of the mentality of the individual who created it. Like if it's a book or another object, I just love that sort of like essence that's being imbued into the item and the effect it can have on the real world. So the idea that these individuals who end up studying these journals become gripped with this concept and they go out and construct their own discs of destruction, because that's what the Magus has here. This Magus is shown in a very bleak world, right? They're standing in a broken building, like a ruined library from the look of it, standing there with their hands around this disc that emulates the exact same concept as the original disc created by Nevinyrral. It's like a part of his mind just got in there and converted and corrupted their mind and taught them also how to fashion this object of destruction. Because understand, Nevinyrral's not your everyday mage. He's an incredibly powerful individual. They did use him for some comedic levity, which is fine. You know what I mean? We had another card called Disentomb, where basically the flavor text on that one says, I deal so often in rotting corpses that when I come across the freshly dead, why, it's like my birthday come early. And that's fun. You know what I mean? You could picture like a necromancer saying something on that level. Now, there's only one other card that mentions Nevinyrral before we got him. And again, this is a flavor text reference, and I just love the flavor of this card. This one's called Dark Bargain, and it's 1 black and 3 for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, and the other 2 into your graveyard. Dark Bargain deals 2 damage to you. And the artwork depicts somebody who has, it's like almost like a knight or someone like that, who's left the normal safety of town, gone out to the town outstretches where there's this little weird bog beast goblin guy who is able to get, like, he can get his hands on all kinds of crazy stuff you'd never expect. But at the same time, what he wants in payment from you is part of your like life essence. So you go and like trade maybe years off of your life, but in exchange for that, you get really powerful objects that are hard to come by. And the flavor text says, I have pustules of the great Radadrabic, very cheap. No? Surely you'll want a tincture of Nevinyrral's pulverized remains. Genuine. And I just love that. I like the idea of this little like bog merchant who literally has some of Nevinyrral's powdered remains, because that is theoretically possible. And we're going to talk about the Nevinyrral card, and I'll tell you how the powdered remains of him is possible as well. And then there's one other card connected to him that I want to talk about as well. Now, Nevinyrral Urborg Tyrant, the card itself. 1 black, 1 blue, 1 white, and 3. He is a 3/6 legendary zombie wizard. He's a Necro Lord, let's be real. Nevinyrral was such an insanely powerful necromancer. He came from Urborg on Dominaria, okay? And he's so powerful that all of the zombie lords, the lich lords that have come since, are maybe at the height of their power about a 10th as strong as Nevinyrral. He's 10 times what all these current day necromancers are. So he's massively powerful, right? So he's 3/6. He's got hexproof from artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. When Nevinyrral Urborg Tyrant enters the battlefield, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token for each creature that went to the graveyard this turn. So note, if he's already made a bunch of tokens or whatever, and like, or you've already made tokens with him before and they get wiped out, putting him out on the turn they get wiped out will replace them all, which is pretty awesome, right? And then his final ability is when he goes to the graveyard, you can pay a generic mana. When you do, disc, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, right? So that ability is literally tied into him. And what's neat art-wise is if you actually take a look right down here in his chest, you can see the inert version of his disc. The one I showed you before was all lit up with different colors and there was the energy flowing into it. The self-same disc is literally strapped up here to his chest. So at a moment's notice, he can pull it down and set it off, right? And that's what actually ends up happening. Nevinyrral was the Lich Lord of Urborg on Dominaria. Not content to stick to his own realm, he decided to bring the battle to Bogarden. Now, Bogarden are the lands of like the red mages and fire and fury and passion. So they came back at him, right? They sent dragons to come at him and everything. But ultimately, Nevinyrral's undoing was a bunch of red mages power slamming gauntlets down, like their gauntlets down into the ground all at once and causing a volcano amidst Urborg to erupt inside of Urborg. So basically, they use this red magic to start destroying Nevinyrral's realm from the middle of it. Now, Nevinyrral saw the writing was on the wall, and being the spiteful jerk that he is, he detonated his disc. He set the disc off to destroy everything. He wanted to ensure that nobody would be able to take his magic powers. You're not going to read my books. You're not going to get any of my items. I'm going to vaporize them all. So he basically destroyed everything within, I think it was like a 10-mile radius, turning it all into dust. So that little bog goblin from the previous card could legitimately have the powdered remains of him. Like that could be the real deal. I love that. Genuine. It's so good. And let's take a moment to appreciate how awesome the card feels overall. First of all, you can disc with him, which feels good from a board wipe standpoint, but also just feels good because it's Nevinyrral and it's his disc. He has his disc ability in it, and he's so spiteful that anytime he goes, yeah, you want me to wipe everything up, boss? I'll do it. You know, like that's great. Animating a bunch of like, everybody who has destroyed this turn are all raised under my power. That's massive necromantic power. He just comes striding out on the battlefield like, what's up? Rise! And everything. It just comes back. Like, that's crazy because it's not just your graveyard. It's everybody's, right? So that's absolutely awesome. And I like the fact that hexproof from artifacts, creatures, and enchantments just makes it feel like he's harder to deal with. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm a Lich Lord, and I'm a really powerful one. I've been alive for a long time. I've laid protective magics on me that make it so that creatures can't target me with their abilities. You can't lay enchantments upon me, and you can't target me with artifacts, you know? I mean, and yes, obviously, the player who controls it can. But either way, that's really cool. The only thing that really stands out to me to Nevinyrral that feels a little bit weird is just the blue and the casting cost, right? I mean, white and black, we've already seen cards associated with them that way. The blue, I think that they just put that in there. So if you're playing with them as a commander, you have more options, and that's fine. But that's the only thing that sticks out to me that doesn't automatically have an answer for it. Now, the other card that they created that is associated with him in Commander Legends, and there's no way I'd put in another video most likely, so I'll toss it in here, is Demonic Lore. 1 black and 2. It's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. At the beginning of your end step, you lose 2 life for each card in your hand. So this is a pretty risky card if you can't get rid of it, right? But we really have it here because of the flavor text, and the art's awesome. The flavor text says, the greatest works of literature leave the reader forever altered. And that's a quote from Nevinyrral, Urborg, Tyrant. Now that's a fantastic quote because it can be interpreted in a number of ways. If you read that without the artwork, you would just think that perhaps you've read some profound literature. And it's like, wow, this has had a change in my perspective on life. Like, it's fundamentally changed how I view some part of the world. That's impressive. But if you look at the artwork, you can see this is a book full of demonic magic, right? And there's this glyph that's being shown there that's etched itself into the guy's hand. It's in his palm, creeping up on either finger, inescapably. That is a horrific concept. Reading some sort of crazy book written by a demon, the words skitter around in your mind as you try and grasp them. And while you're just trying to like deal with the crazy mental fog and things that are going on up here at the same time, your flesh is being irrevocably altered. And I imagine in a fairly painful fashion. You know what I mean? Like, you're gaining power, but at what a ridiculously steep cost. That's some crazy flavor. Either way, I saw Nevinyrral, was super, super excited. Wanted to share my enjoyment with you guys, so let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoy what I do here, then like, comment, and subscribe. It's all great for the channel. Sharing the video around really helps as well. And if you love what I'm doing, then jump on my Patreon and get your name scrolling by like the awesome people who support my channel already. Thanks for coming by, everybody. I will see you guys tomorrow.